I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time. One of the key secrets to achieving fulfillment and happiness in your life and accomplishing any of your goals is your relationship to pain. You know, there's so much. And what I'm going to call it is I'm going to call it good pain. Good pain versus bad pain. It's kind of more simple when you think about it, just physically, but it also applies more importantly almost to emotional pain and psychological pain. So the bottom line is this. You have to develop an empowered relationship in which you move towards good pain and avoid bad pain. Very simple, but super challenging to actually do. And I think well, the sun is really hard. I know it's easier for you to see me when the sun's in my eyes there. How do you like this little old floppy hat? It's pretty rad, huh? It's got like holes in it and stuff. Oh, it's okay. I'll get a little closer and move my chair a little closer. That might work better. They can sort of see me a little better. Okay. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. This is my front yard. After many years of living in sort of not very beautiful places, this is where we live now. Really hard. Another video I'd like to make is how to manifest a homestead. It's a lot of work. If you have fantasies about being a homesteader or even a regenerative homesteader, man, it's a lot of work. You gotta really love working with your hands and working in the dirt and mending things and being in nature. But so I want to give you an example of good pain. For example, right now, my wife is learning about fasting for women and ketosis and how to coach people into a ketogenic diet and the benefits of it, and basically metabolic flexibility and metabolic health. And you know, I'm 56, and I would say all of my years of addiction and with alcohol and sex and codependency and all of that stuff. The biggest one, which I've handled most of it actually, I don't really drink anymore and a lot less codependent, and have a much more healthy relationship with sexuality. And but food, man, that has been a really hard one for me. So yesterday, I did 2 days. I've been wearing a Whoop for better part of 3.5 years and tracking my recovery and health stats. And it's undeniable that the most important thing that I do for my recovery is stop eating earlier in the day. And over the past 3.5 years, I've managed to do that a handful of times, maybe a little bit more than that, but not very much. And then a few dedicated days of fasts, but that's always been the most challenging thing for me, and one of the highest levels of discomfort. And I know it's not just for me. I know so many people struggle with this. So yesterday I was on my second day of trying to stop eating before 1:30. No, I think I was on my third day. I had already done 2 days. Somewhere around that. I don't know. Maybe the first day was a little bit later than that. But in any case, I stopped eating at 1:30, and my mind, like my whole outlook on my future, went negative. And I sat in that pain. So that's kind of the point. The point is that you have to learn to sit with your pain. And in our modern culture, if we feel the slightest tinge of discomfort and pain, we pick up our phone or get some food or go out and do something. Like the addictive nature of our culture is so off the charts. Like, I just don't think, structurally, our cultures didn't have these many opportunities for instant gratification. And instant gratification equals addiction. If you're not sitting in your pain, emotional or physical or otherwise, good pain, that's the distinction. Because you can sit in pain and destroy yourself, and you become a monster, basically. But that's not actually true. So I think I want to focus more on emotional pain. Physical pain, it's super easy to kind of become a dingbat who just, focuses on giant muscles, or being better than everybody else. I mean, I think, competition's great, but humble competition, where you're looking for the greatest good for life and humans, that's the way, that's the path. But so back to the example of the challenge, the pain that I was in. It was good pain. It was, like my future went dark in my mind. Like, oh, I got all this debt to pay off, and it's just, I'm gonna be slogging. I've been working kind of 7 days a week. How do I do? It's just like, once I removed the addiction, so the addictive reward, right? That addictive reward was the food. I'd get the food that would be my reward. So without that daily reward at the end of the day of food, it used to be alcohol, and then I went through the same process with alcohol. So the point is that how I mastered alcohol was I sat with the pain, but not only sat with the pain, I reinvented my identity so that I found joy in other places. But the first step is always sitting with the pain. I have a wonderful therapist, Steve Lee is his name. He's 4 years ago, he gave me some very simple advice. I was struggling with, I think, it's either my relationship or my relationship with my father or something like that. And he said, well, how does that make you feel, when you're dealing with your father and how he, lied to you? And I said, well, it hurts. And I was like, well, just sit with that instead of trying to fix it. And that's the thing. We're always unconsciously and instantly trying to change painful emotional experiences, and that turns us all. We live in an addicted, distracted culture. So in order to become a healthy, happy, productive human being, you've got to step out of that culture and sort of start creating microcultures that are outside of that. One of the reasons that 12 steps work so good is because of the culture. It's a culture of people who have, in some realms, stepped out of the addictive cycle. And a little segue for me is I never understood this 12-step idea of separating out all your addictions, like alcohol over here, food over here, debting over here, sex over here, love over here, codependency over here. I mean, I suppose that's a way to do it, but it never worked for me because it was just so obvious to me that I had these addictive tendencies in all these areas. So why am I just going to focus on one and let the other one go out of control like that? I don't know. That just didn't work for me. So instead, I feel like the more powerful thing to do is whenever you're feeling a deep pain is to sit with it. Now, here's the thing. There's destructive pain. So if you're spiraling into, suicide ideation, that's not positive pain. You need to get help. But, like I was yesterday, where I was really struggling with, just seeing a future that worked for me. And I just kept sort of cascading into this sort of pain. That was the first step. And the 2 days before, I had stopped eating at 1:30 both days. And then yesterday, I gave myself permission to give up. And so I gave up, and at about 5 o'clock, I made a decision that I was going to eat that night. And I let myself have a grilled cheese sandwich, and it was amazing. and, um, but at the same time, it definitely lowered my stats, definitely reduced my optimum health. Um, and I'm not going to beat myself up about that. And I don't think that I think that we do that thinking that, feeling guilty is going to motivate us to change. And it really never does. It's more about sitting in the pain beforehand for longer. So I do think that what was beneficial is sitting from 1:30 or just about 1 o'clock yesterday until 5 o'clock in that sort of hunger pain. That developed my capacity for hunger pain. So I don't have to like stuff something in my mouth when I'm feeling. And it really is like most of us eat emotionally these days. We don't, 90% of the shit we put in our mouth, we don't need, we don't eat for homeostatic health. We eat for sort of just like a dopamine surge. There are a few people out there that don't, but most of us do. I mean, it's just everywhere. You can see it. We're starting to wake up as a culture, which is fantastic. But it's still definitely there. So the point is to sit with your pain, but only the good pain. So how to distinguish the bad pain? I don't know how to do it emotionally. It looks something like, I think bad pain emotionally may look like negative self-talk, like I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, I'm lazy, I don't have what it takes. I think that's probably a negative emotional pain. And, emotions, so people don't understand emotions. Emotions there's a mind loop, there's a loop of thoughts and a body sensation. Loop of thoughts, body sensation. Loop of thoughts, body sensation. And it happens so fast that you don't recognize it. You call it emotions, you call it a feeling, but it's really, it is a sensation in the body that's associated with an interpretation and a loop in your mind. That's why Vipassana meditation is so powerful. And Vipassana is specifically taught in the way where you just observe the sensations in the body and get more deeply attuned to the sensations in the body. And like you'll have a negative thought and you'll feel the negative sensation, and you'll have a positive thought and you'll feel the positive sensation, and sort of releasing the attachment to that. So the feeling of negativity, those negative loops in your mind, those are going to be bad pain, because those negative loops, I mean, you've got to come to see them. But ultimately, you need to recognize those. Anytime you're characterizing your identity as someone who's incapable of change or transformation, or just bad on some level, that's going to be a negative loop. That's going to be a bad kind of pain. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think there are cases where you really do need to sort of go into something as long as you're going to pop out the other side. In some older videos, I've talked about how if you're trying to transform yourself, you need to have if you want this much transformation, you have to have this much support, or probably this much support, because the bigger the transformation you want, the bigger support structure you're going to need to hold it. Because what happens is you're like, I want to change this, and then you start that change, you start changing, and then you reverse back to homeostasis, unless you have a support structure that sort of pulls you up. And that's 99% of the time something outside of yourself. It's not inside yourself. It's like a community. So I'm currently writing personal ecosystem design, and the basic premise of that is that we rise up to our community, our systems, our culture, but we don't go above that. We can rarely go above that. There's a few rare individuals who don't need that, or actually that's not true. They unconsciously design systems that hold themselves up. The rest of us need to consciously build support structures that hold us up. Again, that's why groups like a 12-step work, is because it's a whole ecosystem of culture, of social relationships, of activities, of things to do with your time, of taboos, all that stuff. So let's see, I think I got a little bit sidetracked and lost there. Bad pain emotionally looks like when you're deprecating yourself. Sometimes you're gonna have to touch that in order to sit with pain because it's gonna come up, but you need to have a way to get out. And that could even be just the videos you watch online. You can, hang around. Like for a long time, not for a long time, but for several years, I was just hanging out with Rich Roll on his podcast, because that was the healthiest mental, emotional environment that I could find in the parasocial relationships. Parasocial being your media relationships, which are just as important, if these days not more important, than the physical relationships that you have, because so many of us are isolated. So, and then another example I want to give you of bad pain to avoid is, physically. So for many years in my previous life, 20 years ago, I was a therapeutic yoga instructor, and a bad physical pain it's always in the same place. It repeats. It's usually sharp. And it's kind of associated with a mental loop, like this isn't right. So if you're having that kind of pain, you want to avoid it. Like I have a couple of chronic injuries, which have helped me learn about pain. I broke my neck when I was 18, deformed and fractured neck vertebra, 3 of them. Causes a lot of pain up here. When I was 25, lifting heavy pots, I blew out and ruptured my disc between L4 and L5. So I've had chronic pain that I've been dealing with down there. And what I've learned over the years, like I can really keep my body physically active and at a high level, more than people who don't even have these injuries, because I'm constantly monitoring what's a bad pain and a good pain. That bad pain is like, boom, it's right in the same spot. And it's usually sharp, it's usually intense. It never feels right. But then if I go in the morning and I'll go, like for example, with the lower back, I'll go and I'll stretch my left hip and it hurts. Always hurts, but it's a good pain. And it only comes when I consciously move into it. And I have to move into it mindfully. Like I can get like all like angsty and masculine and aggressive and like move into it and try to stretch it. And I'll hurt myself. I'll like overstretch it or overwork out a muscle. The other day I was working on my neck and I over twisted my neck and it thrashed me for a couple of weeks because I wasn't being mindful and approaching that pain with mindfulness. I'm a little self-conscious because my neighbor is, I can see her out the corner of my eye. I don't think she sees me, but still makes me a little self-conscious. And that's okay, being self-conscious is okay. I think mostly as humans, we don't like to see our flaws and our faults, but those are what make us amazing. Without our weird little flaws and faults, we'd be gross. Like overconfident a-holes. There's, in this day and age, being overconfident is celebrated, but it's the most dangerous thing in the world. I'm segueing right now. Let me get back into pain. So does that relate to pain? Yes, it does. This is really interesting. So if you're really trying to discover how to get healthier and happier and more engaged and more fulfilled and all the good things in life, you've got to go into the good pain. But you have to go in with humility. You don't want to go in with overconfidence, because if you go in with overconfidence, then you'll sort of misdirect it. You'll identify bad pain as good pain. You'll identify like, I did a super awesome, hard, gnarly workout, and it was too hard. And you actually did some tissue damage, So there's always a humility that you need when you're approaching the optimum health and vitality path. I'm going to segue a little bit because it's so near and dear to my heart. There's this divide right now between masculine, sort of aggressive warrior nature, and then the more earth-oriented, nurturing, birth, nature aspect. And you've kind of got people fighting on both sides. You've got all the dudes, mainly on YouTube, who are like, you gotta just be more aggressive and you gotta just like stand up and take a stand and make it. You gotta fight the commies, man. You gotta like, they're gonna take over, they're gonna take your right, they're gonna take your free speech. And then on the other side, you got people who are like, we just have to like, nobody's different, everybody's okay, there's no hierarchy. It really is supposed to be that we just support and nurture everything. And each side is falling for the trap of a false simplicity, of an oversimplified characterization of the whole. We need both. We need the hierarchy, the structure. It's embedded in nature. You just look back at primate troops, and there's a hierarchy, and there's an alpha male, and but you also need the nurturing aspect of the natural environment. The natural environment is the whole. It's home. Nature, like mother and nature, they're home. It's kind of like the hierarchy exists inside of nature. But if you diss either one, you're not going to have an optimal life within yourself or within your microculture or your macroculture. Okay, back to good pain, bad pain. So you need good pain. And that's the other thing too. Like, if you don't seek out good pain, bad pain will come into you. I want you to hear that one. If you don't seek out the good pain, bad pain will come in. And that's on all levels. Like, I have bad pain in my lower back, and I have to seek out the good pain in my hip. I have bad pain in relationship to my real estate investment project when I'm sitting there like cutting pressure treated wood and wearing a dust mask for hours, trying not to inhale the toxic garbage that I'm unfortunately having to use to make sure that this house works. And having a negative thought loop, I've got to sit with that with equanimity. Or bad financial pain is going to come in the future. I got to stay at work when I want to go home and I'm not required to stay because I'm self-employed. Or bad financial pain is going to come in the future. And it is, and those consequences have already hit me in a lot of ways. I've resisted a lot of the bad pain, the good pain in my life. The good pain of staying at work when I don't want to. That's been one of my big challenges, especially as a creative. This is a segue for creatives and entrepreneurs and, people who are sensitive. You have to move into the good pain. I mean, everybody does. So let me take that back. A sensitive type needs to move into the good pain. An insensitive type needs to avoid the bad pain, needs to try to sit with emotional pain and overconfidence pain. They need to sit in the pain of being wrong. So there's the type who takes on too much of the responsibility of the world. And you don't need to sit in the pain of being wrong. You need to sit in the pain of being in action and creating things and being criticized. And then there's those overconfident types. And you need to sit in the pain of all the things that you've been wrong about and how you've harmed others. And it's really distinct paths for each. They're not the same. So if you start having people who are already prone to taking too much responsibility for the world around them and have them sit in the pain of how wrong they've been, then they're just going to spiral into a nightmare. And would be an example of a bad emotional pain that isn't the right place for them to go. So the good pain is sitting in the pain of trying to accomplish things. And then for people who are like overconfident and highly accomplished, you need to sit in the good pain of being wrong. Because it is that overconfidence is a double-edged sword. It will get you all kinds of places, and it will hack to pieces people and things along your way. I'm hearing a tractor in the background. We have a music camp nearby, and sometimes up the canyon I can hear the Berkeley Music Camp, and sometimes in the canyon I can hear the drums coming up. It's a beautiful thing. Just reminded me of this practice of when you're super busy and overwhelmed, of taking micro moments to just enjoy whatever it is you're enjoying. Like right now, it's so still and so beautiful. Such a nice morning, and the view is so nice. And just taking a moment to just sit in that and enjoy it, and then go off to do what you need to do. Sit in the good pain. Just keep refining your path. What is a good pain? A good pain, it's usually dull. It's usually something you avoid. That's probably the easiest way to define a good pain. It's something you avoid. Avoid the bad pain. Sharp, intense, righteous if you're like a very highly confident person. I don't think there's like really a bunch of overconfident people watching this, but it's good to know that your medicine is different from the overconfident people's medicine. Yeah. Okay. Please leave questions and comments below. Hope this was valuable.